All right, folks, welcome back. This is the second episode of interviews here on Intern Talks Wheel. Our debut episode was over half a year ago with one Connor Zilich. It was last July. And I'm pleased to bring the series back, and I'm pleased to bring another racing prodigy onto the show. We had Connor Zilich right before he popped off in NASCAR. And I think this is going to be one of them interviews that you look back at and you're going to be like, okay, that's what this guy used to be. With me today is a driver I've personally dubbed the fastest 16-year-old in racing. One of the top prospects on the NASCAR scene. And in my opinion, one of the top prospects in the racing scene in general. With me today is none other than Brent Crews. Brent Crews, welcome to Intern Talks Wheel.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You got a pretty good lineup so far with me and Connor. Getting to see what Connor's done and him being on the show before me is really cool. Was able to give you some kind of backstory. Was I grew up racing with Connor my whole life. We met when we were 6 or 7 years old and have been racing each other for a decade now. It sounds crazy, but yeah, you interviewed him, and then I think he won Watkins Glen right after. So maybe you just bring some good luck.
Yeah, I hope. Well, actually, yeah, I interviewed him after his truck debut and before his Xfinity debut. The next debut he ever made, he won. So with that track record, North Wilkesboro is looking good.
Love to hear it.
All right, Brent. So as is the I say as is the norm. There's only been one episode, but if we're gonna follow that episode's lead today, what I want to talk to you about is your journey up to this interview, I guess. So the first question is, how did Brent Crews become a racing fan? How did Brent Crews get into racing? Was it A, you started watching it on TV and you thought it was cool and wanted to try it out? Or did you just happen to try it without any prior knowledge of racing and it stuck? Where did Brent Crews' love of racing begin?
Yeah, so it's a long story, and I'll go into detail about it. It was definitely B. I wasn't naturally a fan of cars or anything like that. I was kind of too young to even really understand what it was, to tell you the truth. I started getting into all the fun stuff when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was a flag football player. I was always super competitive. I loved soccer and all those sports, and I would just get so frustrated when I would lose. I was always very competitive. And then my dad asked me one day. He was like, "Hey, do you want to go try something to where it's you versus everybody, and not you and a bunch of your teammates?" And I was like, "Oh, I'd love to." And we went to the go-kart track right after that. And I realized, like, okay, like, it's me versus everybody. And that's what I wanted to do. My first ever time in anything racing wise was in a go-kart at the time called GoPro Motorplex, Trackhouse Motorplex. I ran 22 laps and I didn't know where to pull off the racetrack. And I hated it. Was the worst experience of my life. I quit for 6 months and it started to snow in North Carolina, and all these people were driving their ATVs, and I wanted something to drive. So my dad asked if I wanted to pull out the go-kart, and I said sure. And I got in the go-kart. I did some donuts in the snow, and then that started this crazy roller coaster over the past 10 years of turning into a race car driver, from across the board to dirt racing to go-karts to soon to be trucks. It's been a wild journey, but was never really too big of a fan of race cars or anything like that. I always thought supercars were cool. Never thought at that age I would be where I'm at today, that's for sure.
Neat. And how big of a role did your parents play in terms of supporting this racing journey of yours? Because I can imagine it may not have been easy finding out that your child wants to become a racing driver and all the responsibilities and stuff you're gonna have to cover as that parent watching over that child.
Yeah, they played a huge role, and obviously you hear this a lot, but it's the truth, is without my parents there'd be no way in the world that I would be where I'm at today. They played a massive role. Just grateful for both of them to be able to take those weekends and days off. My dad spent so much time with me at the racetrack from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays, skipping 4 or 5 hours of school every day to go practice my craft, and then miss the whole weekend of when most kids are at birthday parties to be at the racetrack to continue to be better. And that's what we did for years upon years, and that's where I just kind of leapfrogged my age group, and now that's why I'm racing with guys that are twice my age.
Love that, man. And let's talk about going from just karting as a hobby to karting professionally. What was it like competing in your first championship as a child? Can you go back to your first ever big win, or were basically a win that you got that made you realize, yeah, this is a path I can actually take and become successful at? When did it turn from a hobby to a literal career path for you?
So for me, it was never a hobby, and even when I was playing flag football at the YMCA, which most people know what that is here in the States, but um, it was something in me that I never wanted to lose. Whether it was, I never wanted to be the caboose at my in my kindergarten class. I just I always wanted to be first in everything, and that's kind of where that came. So I can't really relate to it ever being a hobby. I would say some of my first wins were very memorable. Was at GoPro, and that's what kind of just kept me striving for more. Once I got that first win, I was like, man, like I don't ever want to finish second again. This sucks. So that was that feeling. Yeah, I mean, it's something that's just amazing.
And you'd race around North Carolina because that's where you're from. But in terms of when did the traveling begin? When did you start to have to leave states? When did you have to start leaving your state to go to other states? And then how did it go from going to other states to going to other countries to do karting?
Yeah, so obviously that was a big jump. It's a lot different as a 6 or 7 year old kid when you've raced for the past 1 or 2 years at the same track. Like it gets to become a lot easier. When you start traveling is when it gets difficult. I'm very grateful and thankful for my dad and the fact that he knew what he knew and figured it out very fast that the best guys in the world would race as many races as possible, and they would travel everywhere to race. So that's what we did. I The trips I remember was always around Christmas. There was the Daytona kart track, which is in the middle of Daytona the Speedway, and would have to miss Christmas or leave the day before to make that race. We'd have to have Christmas moved up to be able to do that. And I remember the sacrifices it took, not just from me, but to him and my whole family to be able to pursue that. Um, and that was super special. And then kind of starting to win those races at those ages, you still don't really know what's going on. You just think, oh well, I'm better than most, right? Until you don't turn 8 or 9 and you realize that, okay, like I'm actually different than a lot of these kids, and realizing, okay, this is actually can make a career out of this.
You had your I'm him moment.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully I had great parenting to be told, like, just so you know, like you aren't the average. And it took a lot of work to do that. I mean, we were at the go-kart track 3 days a week running hundreds of laps. So it wasn't just like it fell out of nowhere. So it's cool for sure.
All right. And now I want to know about how we got from Brent Crews, the local North Carolina karter, to Brent Crews, the world championship karter. What was it like going overseas to do karting for the first time? And how was it adapting to a new country in terms of competition and just racing against children from countries you had never even heard of?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it was wild traveling. I mean, out of the state for the first time was crazy, let alone the country. Um, one of my favorite trips was going to France, and I didn't really realize like the meaning of winning the race before that. So I had to win a race to be able to get the ticket to be able to go race that race. So it was a big step. It wasn't like you could just put up a bunch of money and go there. Like, no, you had to win a big race to be able to earn your spot in the race in France. So that's what I was able to do, and kind of realizing like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to go compete against kids from all across the world that are the best in their country. That was a big step, and you know, it's just so much different over there. Unfortunately, I was able to race for great race teams. My first ever race, I was there in France. I actually didn't win on the track, but with some penalties, I was able to get that world championship, and that was kind of the first race um, that was probably my favorite win, and still is up there.
Neat. And another thing I realized going through your career is that there are a lot of people, or maybe we can get into this later or we could do it now, but there are a lot of people that you've raced against that are household names now in other different series. I mean, you're on the NASCAR ladder, obviously, but I remember when I was speaking to Connor, he was talking about going toe to toe with a guy that's literally in Bahrain right now testing Formula One cars in the form of Andrea Kimi Antonelli. I know you've gone up against guys like Freddie Slater too, who's obviously on the Formula ladder as well. Is it always interesting for you to look at certain people and where they are and thinking, wow, I really used to race against these guys?
Yeah, that's cool to say, and it's definitely even cooler to say that I've been able to beat both of them in the biggest races in the world. Um, Not a flex, but definitely something um, cool to be able to say. Was able to race head to head with Freddie Slater for the world championship in France and beat him by 7 thousandths of a second. I think that was the same margin of victory in the race at Atlanta. So that was super neat. And then was able to race Andrea Kimi Antonelli multiple times. And the coolest moment I have from him was being able to race him in Vegas at the biggest race in America at the time, and we raced head to head for the final 5 laps. We charged through the field. I think we started 12th and 13th and made our way to the front together, and then raced head to head for the win, where we were able to win that race, and that was amazing. He's him and Connor are the two fastest guys I've been able to ever race against, and being able to beat Kimmy was super cool, and watch him. He's gonna end up taking over Lewis Hamilton's seat real soon. It's something cool to say, and something you'll never be able to forget.
Yeah, and obviously you're on the NASCAR ladder now, but when you look at where some of your competitors from the past are in terms of Formula One, do you ever sit back and think, if I had the right kind of opportunities, I would have easily had enough talent to have gone to Formula 3 and F2 and contend for an F1 seat?
Yeah, like that was always a thought to me. I feel like one of the most raw motorsports is NASCAR. I had the opportunity to be able to go to Europe and kind of go down that path. I didn't really have as much interest. I feel like on Sundays you can see there's 12 cars every single week that have a shot at winning and that can win, right? And I feel like in Formula One, every year there's only about 2. So to me, that's not something I was as interested in. Given the opportunity, if you could go race one race, like that would be amazing. My dream was always to be in the NASCAR Cup Series or IndyCar. I feel like IndyCar is amazing as well, and you see guys like Kyle Larson being able to go run those one-off races, and watching Tony Stewart do it back in the day was amazing as well, and that would be something I'm highly interested in.
All right. So Brent Crews, he goes abroad and he becomes a world karting champion and he comes back. But one part of your career that I think is genuinely amazing. And I think it really sets you apart from almost all the other young drivers that I see on the NASCAR scene right now, or just the racing scene in general, is your dirt experience. We've spoken about how well you've done on karting, but what was your first experience on dirt like?
That's a great question. So I was actually, it's cool to drive for Joe Gibbs now. I have a story behind it. But as I was racing go-karts at GoPro, so was Ty Gibbs, the grandson of Joe Gibbs, and he was out there testing, and my dad is actually who introduced him to the dirt track. But um, there's a track called Millbridge, which is only about 30 minutes from us, and was able to go drive a dirt cart there on the side. You know, our motto kind of growing up was from my dad was race whatever you can get in. And you see right now the best in the world, that's what they do. So it's cool that we were able to figure that out so young. And I feel like that's kind of crafted me into the race car driver that I am today. So I was able to start off with the karts at Millbridge, and then that developed to more and more. Have been able to race all the way up to micros at that racetrack. So that played, a huge part of my career was there, and that's kind of where it fired off my dirt career to where it's at now.
Right. And so we go from the karting, and maybe you were driving outlaw midgets at the time, or, just the smaller sprint cars at the time, to eventually becoming a driver that was getting into the stock car scene. Now, what was the transition like from stock cars, or rather from karts to stock cars? How was that?
That's a good question. I think the biggest transition for me was understanding how big the right side of the car is. You can't really see it, and in go-karting, you knew exactly where both of your front tires is, and in stock cars it was a lot more difficult to understand that. Having a spotter on in your ear is way different. There was just a lot to adapt to. So yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest thing is understanding where your right front tire and your right rear tire are. Actually, um, first ever story was my first ever race in a pro late model was in Nashville, and I actually wrecked because of that. So you know, figuring that out took some time. Was thankful to have the speed kind of pretty much from the get-go, but yeah, that was a big adjustment. Go-karts were the shifter karts were amazing. They were really really fast, and when you get in the late models, they feel more in slow motion. So the speed was never something I really had to adapt to. Sprint cars and dirt midgets and all that stuff feel way faster than any late model you'll get in. So that was always a big gain for me.
Right. And one thing you and I spoke about a long time, one of our conversations a while back before this interview was the first time you had ever driven a 410 sprint car before, because we know your midget history with the Chili Bowl, and you've and even the micro sprints, because you won the Tulsa shootout this year, and we're gonna get to that. But you drove a 410 sprint car at a pretty tender age, and I distinctly remember you described it as it was like the Millennium Falcon. What?
Yes.
Talk to me about your 410 sprint car debut.
Okay. So I ran a year of 360s. I think about 20 or so races. That car makes 750 horsepower roughly. And man, that already felt crazy fast. And I was fortunate enough to be able to drive a 410. I didn't get any practice. I went straight into qualifying, where my crew chief and my dad said I had to hold it wide open. So 960 horsepower to the wheels, holding it wide open at, oh gosh, I don't even remember how old I was. I think I was, um, yeah. So yeah, so I was 13 years old, um, holding it wide open at uh at 14 years old was pretty crazy. And at that time, there's smoke in the car, so it's hard to breathe in qualifying, and you can't even see. You're going so fast. It was an unreal feeling.
Wonderful. And you ended up finishing, where is it, fourth in the race?
Yep, I started 14th or so, and I finished fourth in my first ever start. So that was pretty neat.
Alrighty. So it's gonna be very hard alternating between all the different series you drive in. So I guess now would be a good time to segue into, let's go to 2023-ish. Let's talk about Trans Am. What was your first experience like in a TA2 car? How did the experience come about, and how did you get accustomed to the car?
Yeah, so it came about. We already kind of had our eyes on the car. We always thought they were super cool. The first ever experience was went to VAR to watch Nitro Motorsports, my team, and all the karting stuff. We built a great relationship with Nick Tucker. And speaking back to Connor, Connor ran his first ever Trans Am race at VIR, and that was the one I went to be able to go watch. He qualified on the pole and had mechanical failure. And that racing was was about as real as it could get. That was a stock car on almost steroids handling wise, and it looked amazing. So I was interested from the start. I got to do my first test in one, and I kind of knew that's what I wanted to do. And it was the best thing that I could do at my age. Convincing the series to let me run was probably the biggest battle. The owner of the series said to me before my first race at Sebring, he said, as long as you don't hit everything, we'll expect you to finish in the mid pack, and that would be an amazing start. I qualified sixth and was running in third before I had a mechanical failure and was able to win. I believe it was 3 races at the end of that year. So yeah, that was cool, and the Trans Am is a big part of my career still. The TA2, evolved to the TA class for me, and it's kind of a great stepping stone for that age gap.
Nice. And obviously, you are Trans Am's youngest TA2 champion. You are Trans Am's youngest TA2 pole sitter. You are Trans Am's TA2 youngest winner. And you are the TA youngest winner. I really want to hear about that too, because I believe you were supposed to make your official Trans Am debut last year at Sebring. I think this year you were sick and Ernie Francis had to replace you, but you ended up having a go at Road America with the Weaver Challenger. What was that entire weekend like, driving something that crazy for the first time?
Yeah, I didn't realize how fast it was until I got to experience it. To tell all of y'all, they make 880 horsepower and they weigh 2,700 pounds. So it's 100 pounds lighter than a TA2 car and makes 380 roughly more horsepower. So to only imagine that is crazy, but to drive it is even wilder. So yeah, they handle amazing. The first experience at Road America, at the end of the back straightaway, you're going 193 mile an hour into a really really deep brake zone. Um, was definitely a wake up call. Yeah, that was probably one of the coolest cars I've ever driven to this day, and I don't think that's gonna go anywhere.
And you did end up taking the win at Road America, becoming the youngest Trans Am winner of all time. And you probably will be the youngest Trans Am winner forever, But
Yeah, it's
I
crazy to
guess
think about.
the other aspect I want to talk about now is we're going to go back to the dirt racing a bit, because the Chili Bowl is a race that looks like it's very important to you. I'd love to see you eventually try like the Knoxville Nationals, but so far in your career, the Chili Bowl seems to be that marquee dirt race that you've been trying to win for a while. I know the first time you went at it, you had the Trackhouse sponsorship. The second time you were with Keith Coons, I believe, with the Gear Wrench 67. And this year you left that team and you were driving the number 71. And what has it been like competing at the Chili Bowl? Being as young as you are, competing and trying to go toe to toe with all of these experienced dirt racers, what's the Chili Bowl experience been like? Because from a spectator's POV, it's genuinely one of the wildest things I
It's
watch.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but what's it
when you're
like
there, when you're
competing?
there watching or when you're there racing, actually, you're there for 8 days now it is, Saturday to the next Sunday. It's amazing. You get to practice on Sunday, and then you pick your prelim night, and you're able to watch and honestly be a race fan. And we don't get to do that a lot, so it's pretty cool. I've obviously tried at the Chili Bowl a couple times now, and everything didn't line up the way I've wanted it to, but it was cool. The first ever year I got to run that beautiful blue Trackhouse car with Chad Boat, and that was amazing. I was running side by side with Christopher Bell. We made contact, and it blew my right rear tire, and unfortunately took me out of contention. And that was the year I had ran over 30 midget races, and I was full-time midget driver at the time. So yeah, that sucked. And then the next year I ran for Paul May, who I ran for this year. We finished third and was racing for the lead with Rico Abreu and Mitchell Moles on the last lap. And stuff like that is all you can ask for. And ultimately finished third, and then ran for Keith, which was cool, and then ran the 71 again this year. Was pretty crazy. To kind of give you a rundown. I flipped in my heat race, and then had to come from a C main. Won my C main. Started last in the B main. Came from, I think, 15th or 16th to the win, which was amazing. And then started, I think it was 17th in the feature, and ultimately ended up finishing fourth. That was pretty dang cool.
Yeah, it was cool to watch, and unfortunately, it didn't really work out on the main day with the B main that you had. But
yeah, I was racing in a transfer spot, and had a guy just feed me a heavy right rear, so that one hurt. And flipping twice in the same couple days isn't great either.
But I guess it's just the experience for you at the end of the day. But I'm sure that Chili Bowl win, it's coming, surely, once everything just gets all together, and
I'll keep racing it for as long as I can till it does. So
nice.
But at the end of the day, we did win the shootout the week before.
Yes.
So that was
you do have a golden driller via.
I do have a driller, and it's in the middle of our living room. So that's something to be very proud of. Racing against 433 different drivers in that class, against Kyle Larson, against Christopher Bell, and ultimately winning it all is something to be super excited about, and it's something I'll never be able to forget.
All right, so now we're gonna have to go back into the stock car world for a bit. There's so many worlds we have to go to with you, Brent, because you've been so many different places. But we're gonna shift back to stock cars, because I want to hear about your Cars Tour season last year. You were driving the number 29 Mobil 1 Toyota Camry in the late model stock division of the Cars Tour, courtesy of one Kevin Harvick. How'd that even come about? How'd you meet Kevin Harvick, and how'd you manage to get in one of Kevin Harvick's cars?
Yeah, so to give you that backstory, Kevin was a huge part of my racing career, and especially through the late model stuff. Was able to meet Kevin at the racetrack, at the go-kart track. He has a son, Keelan. I'm sure everybody has heard his name now. He's lighting it on fire. Met him at the go-kart track. Was able to get talking with him, and build that relationship. Was able to win a go-kart race on Saturday, and then win a dirt race on Wednesday at Millbridge, and ultimately that led the relationship. The coolest thing happened when I figured out that I was going to be able to drive the iconic 29 with Mobil 1 on the side of it. Was something, you don't even dream of it, because you don't even think really that's a possibility. And seeing it at the racetrack the first time was something to just be amazed and proud of. And was able to win a good bit of races with it, and compete for a championship at the end of the day.
Neat. And as we know, you are a Toyota driver now, but what was it like being signed to such an important brand in terms of your journey to get to Cup racing eventually, because I'm pretty sure that's the goal at this point, to become a Cup Series driver. But being backed by Toyota, being a Toyota driver, what was it like getting the news, realizing that they were interested in you, and eventually putting that pen to paper and becoming a development driver for one of the biggest brands in racing?
Yeah, I feel like they're the most important in all of motorsports, and to be able to race for them is a dream come true, and it's something as a kid, like your goal is to race for Joe Gibbs Racing, and I know that was always mine, and building that relationship with Toyota is where it all starts. I kind of knew that there was a possibility there when I was 12 to 13 years old, and that midget year where I was able to win 5 races, I think it was, at 12 years old, is where that relationship started to come along. Raced my TRD midget, and was able to win those couple races, and that's when the talks started to come along, and fortunately was able to sign the contract not too long after that, and kind of just blew up from there. To be honest with you, was able to win so many races with them now, and hopefully keep that going for a really, really long time.
Love that. And this next one's gonna be very interesting because I want to talk to you about your ARCA debut at Watkins Glen, and it's funny because I originally watched that race when I was making my first video ever about Connor Zilic, and it wasn't until I went back, I was rewatching the race. I made the video already, and I was rewatching the race, and they mentioned your name. I saw you were in third. I didn't watch ARCA like that, so I didn't know who you were. And then they said you were 15. I was like, and he's there in third, competing for the win. And after I watched that, I was like, this Brent Crews guy might be next up if he's already doing this on his ARCA debut. And I started doing research about you. I ended up making that video that you saw, and then you DM'd me telling me how you thought it was cool. You're giving me more Brent Crews lore, and that's how we pretty much became friends. But what, like, from your perspective as a 15-year-old, you got that debut with Venturini, the 25 car for Watkins Glen. I've heard this race from Connor's point of view, but now I want to hear what the ARCA 2023 race at Watkins Glen was like from your point of view.
Yeah, it was cool. As the race went on, we actually had an issue where to the right-hand corners, my car wasn't picking up fuel pressure. We had an oval tank in it, so it wasn't reading it when I would go through the right-hand corners. So it was just splashing fuel in there, and it wouldn't pick up. So that was a big hindrance at the end of the race. But it was cool. I got to race with Jesse a lot. And it started raining, and that's when you saw that last lap kind of chaos where we all were coming to the line together, which is cool, and now we're all best friends. So that's something I think we will never be able to forget. But yeah, that was something never be able to forget. It was a cool racetrack, and the weather made for an exciting race.
Yeah, and you spoke to me earlier about how you and Connor became friends, but where did the link with Jesse come from?
That's a great question. So all through Toyota, he was a Toyota development driver as well for Venarini and for a lot of different late model teams, and we worked out at the gym together at Toyota Racing, and a couple days we worked out at the same time, and we went to the go-kart track with the Toyota karts, and I grew up a go-karting kid, so I was faster than Jesse. Jesse had never done it before, so he was asking me for tips and tricks, and I started helping him out with that, and he started helping me out with my late model stuff that I was getting into, because that was his bread and butter, and go-karting was my bread and butter. And then we just kind of built a friendship off of that. And how Connor actually met Jesse was I became friends with Jesse, and I was friends with Connor, and because I grew up with Connor before I knew Jesse. And there was one day where we were planning on going to the go-kart track, and I was like, hey, like, Connor grew up doing this as well, and he's really good. Let's talk to him about it. And that's kind of where we all three started developing that relationship together and friendship together. So fortunately, that's what that's what we've been able to do. So yeah, having three best friends like that, and we're all very, very talented and able to make each other better. And growing up with somebody like Connor, somebody that wants to win, almost as bad as you, makes you a lot better. So yeah, that relationship plays a big factor into to our racing careers.
And even doubling down on that, they're obviously older than you, and as a result, they're a bit further in their careers, stock car wise, than you are right now. What is it like? Because I even you even tweeted today, I'm watching my friends race at Kota, and I'm not there yet. But what is it like seeing your friends compete at the level that they are at Xfinity? We know Connor's like gonna make his cup debut tomorrow. He's gonna drive a cup car in anger for the first time ever. What's it like watching your friends do something that you know you're eventually gonna do?
Yeah, it's super cool. It's something I'm very proud of them for. I know when I turn that 18, I'll be able to be able to race with them. Eventually, I'm just not old enough right now. I still got a year to go, but I'm proud of all of them. Watching, sitting at home and on a Saturday and watching my best friends, Connor Zilich and Jesse Love, and my friend Daniel as well is racing the Xfinity Series, and not being able to race with them sucks, but I know the day will come, and I'm looking forward to it. But rooting for them and cheering them on, and hoping that one of them can bring it home to Mooresville.
Wonderful. So we spoke about your Xfinity debut, but you not your Xfinity. Whoa, fast forwarding a bit too far there. ARCA. We spoke about your ARCA debut at Watkins Glen, and then I believe was it literally was Illinois the next day?
Yes, it was 2 days later. So the ARCA race was on Friday at
And then the
Watkins
next
Glen,
ARCA
and
race was
then
on
on
Sunday.
Sunday was the dirt race. So I finished third coming to the line at Watkins Glen, and was able to battle it out and win on that Sunday.
Yeah, take me back to that. You won your second youngest ARCA winner ever, and you did it on dirt. And was it like a perfect merge in terms of your careers, seeing that you're trying to go on the stock car ladder, but you've also done dirt racing before, and then voila, a stock car race on dirt just falls into your into your
Perfect.
schedule.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that was amazing. And that was when I started to become friends with Jesse, and we raced really hard. I didn't get the pole. So actually, yes, I did. I did get the pole to that one. But we raced really hard, and Jesse passed me before that halfway break, and man, just had me thinking on how I was going to be able to figure this out. And fortunately, um, after that 50 laps, we kind of stepped our game up and was able to come on top and win that race. And that was just kind of a big jump start to everything that led to more ARCA races and more late model races and more wins after that. That was definitely a big moment in my career. Was that win in Springfield.
And from Springfield, we went to DuQuoin, which is where you got your second ARCA win again on the dirt. And this time you're going up against Sawalich and Lavar Scott, Andres Perez de Lara, and you managed to get the job
And
done again.
Jesse,
I guess the next question is, I know you've made more ARCA starts since then, and yeah, you've only got the 2 wins so far. More will hopefully be on the horizon now. This deal with Joe Gibbs Racing. But in terms of, we've spoken about the highs, but what have been your lows in racing? You know, days you look back on when things weren't going well. Have you ever been in a situation where you second guessed yourself? And if so, what helped you pull out of that slump and remind yourself that you are that guy?
that is a great question, and I think every driver has had their moment where they've had to think that. And I've had my best friends that we've talked about that, and I think Jesse will openly admit, like, his was 2022, and Connor had his years, and I've had mine as well. And they're just little stints, when you go on a 3-race span of not running well, or you wreck 2 races in a row. Like, you're thinking like, what is it that I'm doing? And you just got to snap out of that. And I think the best way to that is to just look back and realize how many races you've won, and the fact that you wouldn't be in this position if you're not that guy. So that's what kind of helps me. And then I would say the answer to your last question is how to get out of that slump is to go win the next one. So it's really easy if you can win that next race after you've been in that thought of slump, and then that just kind of goes away and kickstarts that winning again.
Nice. I love to hear that, especially when from somebody as young as you are. But I guess now the next step for you is the truck series. You're gonna be in a partial schedule this year with Tricon, which is one of the best truck teams there is. You're gonna be driving the number 1 truck in 9 races this year. How excited are you to finally get your taste of the NASCAR National Series? Oh, what kind of prep? I know you didn't test out. You tested out Rockingham, right? You
Yep.
were there. Yeah. So you've tested the truck already, but what has the preparation been like in terms of getting ready to make your truck series debut later at North Wilkesboro? What do you have to do?
Yeah, so there's a lot of sim work that goes on behind the scenes that that isn't open to the public, but yeah, you get to run on the big sim at TRD, the location in Salisbury, and just get your feel working with a new crew chief and a new team for me, and new engineers and all that stuff. That's something that takes time, and that's something that you just don't build overnight. Wilkesboro has been a cool track for me. I've ran there 3 times now. In the late model side of things, it'll be definitely a lot different in the truck. In a late model stock, you don't really have to worry about being too aero tight. And at Wilkesboro, that's in a truck, it's a lot different. So I'm excited to be able to get to figure that out and go through the leaps of it all, and I'm sure have to figure that out real quick. So looking forward to it, and gonna be able to watch some prep and ask questions. Fortunate enough that my friends have been able to race in the truck series, before me, and then they won't be racing that week. So I'll get a lot of guidance from them as well.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of what I wanted to lead my second question into, which is who do you go to for help and guidance when it comes to your stock car side and even in your dirt side? Who are the kind of people that you reach out to when you feel like you're struggling in an area of your craft, whether it be on stock cars or on dirt? I'm sure you probably have different people depending on what the discipline is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's everybody, at the end of the day has the things that they're best at. Some guys are really, really good at super speedway racing, and some guys are really good at short tracks. So just trying to kind of figure that out. And, at a place in a late model, very fond to go to Jesse, and thankful that he's as open as he is. He's an open book to be able to come to me and ask questions, and be able to kind of apply that, take the things here and there from him, take little things here and there from Connor. Really at the end of the day helps. And at the end of the day, it makes us all better, because we're able to kind of go in a pattern of asking each other questions, and that'll just continue to develop our craft.
Right. And even on dirt, like who you go to for help when it comes to if you need tips on dirt?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been fortunate enough to race for great race teams, and honestly, I would say I go more to my dad than anybody on the dirt side of things. We've been doing it together for so long now that he's been the most the biggest impact of driver coaches I've probably ever had. And he sees what I'm doing wrong faster than anybody else, even myself most times. So and that's a big help. So yeah, just watching video and being able to kind of figure that out. Dirt's a lot more difficult to do the prep on, because the racetrack changes so much. But yeah.
Yeah, and I guess the last question I want to ask about that specific aspect is we've seen where drivers like to go on dirt because they feel like there are some skills that are transferable to being a full-time stock car driver. But is that the case? And if so, what are the transferable skills that a dirt driver can incorporate into stock car racing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I feel like it's it's just developing that craft. And the saying is the more stuff you can drive, the better. And to give you an example, Jeff Gordon was obviously one of them. Tony Stewart and Kyle Larson, I think, are the three big names that you can name right off the bat that kind of raced everything. And when they were young and when they're older, and were able to win in all of them. So to me, when you race dirt and you're able to come back on into the asphalt side of things, dirt has so much chaos, and it takes so much car control that the asphalt stuff necessarily doesn't bring you. And when you go race asphalt, you have to be really smooth and calm and collected, and that's something you don't get as much in dirt. So they both have their perks, and I think if you can master both, at the end of the day, you'll figure out both pretty quick.
Right, love that. So we've spoken about what you have driven, but you're only 16. You got a long way to go. What race cars are there out there in this life that Brent Crews looks at and says, you know what, man, I want to go in one of those?
If we can't say Xfinity and Cup, obviously that's the goal to the future. I would definitely have to go ahead and say an LMP2 car is up there on my list. LMP3, LMP2, both of those are really high up there.
GT3s?
The GT3 stuff is really cool as well. Those cars are fast. So yeah, any of that kind of stuff. An Indy car one day would be really dang cool. Obviously, it would be difficult, but I think a Formula One car, I think anybody would want to drive. So yeah, anything that I haven't stepped foot into, I would definitely want to.
And that includes the dirt late model, because
Uh,
you and I have gone back and forth over this before. You're not that big a fan of them, but it's still something you at least want to try out before you flat out just say, you know what, this ain't for me.
yeah, I would try it. I don't know why I developed this hatred at a young age for them. I don't know where that necessarily came from. If I did get the opportunity, I would love to, and maybe it would change my mind, and become one of my favorites. But yeah, I mean, one day I would definitely be interested in in driving one.
All right, so outside of racing, obviously that's what takes up most of your time. But outside of racing, what does Brent Crews do for fun? What's Brent Crews like off the track?
Yeah, that's a great question. It depends. Depends on the weather here and all that other stuff. I have two brothers that I'm fortunate to spend a lot of time with. My favorite things to do outside of the race car is golf, and I like fishing and that kind of stuff. All the outdoor stuff I really enjoy. I'm still a kid, so trying to do all that fun stuff. I like playing pickleball and any ball sports. To me, I enjoy.
Good. And I take it it's something you do a lot with your friends too. And
Yep,
even just outside of,
Jesse and
yeah.
Connor again, bringing them into it. We play a lot of golf together and stuff like that.
And I know this because I don't even know I don't know if it's a secret thing that I can't show the world, but you did send me a picture of Jesse teaching Connor how to golf.
Yeah, Jesse teaching Connor how to golf. That was pretty funny.
Where was that where'd that take place?
Um, I have a little setup at my house to where we have like a putting green and a little simulator. So that was one of those late nights that ended up coming along.
All right, neat. And so I guess in terms of your journey to where you are today, I think one aspect of your career that really sticks out, especially when you look at a lot of other careers, is the fact that you're able to do it without necessarily having that epic backing. Obviously, you're with Toyota now, but before that, it was really just you reaping the rewards of your talent. Do you think your journey is something that other kids can look at and be like, all right, I may not have the money, I may not be able to like buy a seat here and there, but if I just do well enough, I can make it as well?
Yeah, and that's something I take a lot of pride in, and hoping to kind of show that you necessarily don't need all the money in the world to become a race car driver. Obviously, you have some to start, but if you can, I always say, or my dad always told me, is winning fixes everything. So if you win every single race, you won't have an issue of finding something to drive. So that was kind of always my motto. If I figured out how to win, you know, it kind of is the medicine to everything else.
Wonderful. All right, I'm gonna try and hit you with some rapid fire generic questions just to end it off. Question number one: what's the hardest you've ever laughed in your racing career?
Hmm. Honor in the car or out of the car?
Both. I mean, whichever one's the hardest laugh, I guess.
I I would say in the car the first time I ever flipped a an outlaw kart. It was racing Carson Quapple. That name is very heard of now. Really talented race car driver. He's a couple years older than me. I was trying to chase him down, and in the dirt stuff, the outside didn't have any wall, so I ran right over the edge of it and flipped, and I got out of the car, and I don't even remember how old I was. I was about 9 or 10, and I told my dad, I was like, I started laughing and said, "That's fun. Let's do that again." And he suggested me not to. So that was a very funny moment that I remember very vividly. Off the track, that's very difficult. It's probably with my buddies watching a wreck or something or something along those lines. But racing is such a fun sport. There's just too many moments to even count.
Nice. All right. You're in a scenario where you're chasing somebody down and you have earphones in your ears while racing and you can play any song to lock in. What song are you playing?
Hmm, that's a great question. I used to have a good answer for this. Um, ooh, I don't know. It depends. Depends on, I would say, what track you're on and how hard you need to drive it. If it's more of a finesse or a chill, I think some Katy Perry would go hard. I think that would help.
Fair enough. And how else do I wanna bring a nice little bow on everything? Is what's it like being like, okay, yeah, I asked Connor this, so I might as well ask it to you too. What is it like having fans and the celebrity that comes with being a racing driver? Obviously, it's gonna go higher and higher the more you win, the more you compete, and the higher level you get to. But even at the level you're at right now, you do have supporters, myself included. What's it like actually having fans, seeing people make edits of you and threads of you? I know my friend Magnus made a long thread about you and Weston Workman. What's it like having fans or people that support you, people at tracks that come and say, "Hi, you're Brent Crews, can I have a picture?" What's that like?
That's a great question, and that's super cool, and it kind of brings me back to when I was younger. I remember the days where all I wanted was for someone to interact with me. And when they did, that was kind of a game changer, and I still remember very specifically on those kind of moments and realizing that old or young, that everybody has a dream, and you know um, those people are just like us. So, when you see race car drivers that don't interact with their fans, it definitely hurts because there is drivers out there that want to talk to their fans, and every opportunity I get, it's cool to interact and be able to have good conversations with them.
All right, Brent. I think we've gotten through as much as we need to right now. I just like to thank you for joining me here. I think this is going to be a lot shorter than the first one, but it's good because it was very concise, very to the point. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you for being the second ever guest on interviews here on Intern Talks Wheel. And another trend I want to start now is I want the guest to nominate another guest. So I'm gonna give you some time to think about it, unless you have it on your mind
I already
already.
have an answer. I feel
Okay,
like
all
it's
right.
only right
Who
for
should be
Jesse to be
episode
next.
3? Who should the guest be for episode 3 of interviews on Intern Talks
I
Wheel?
feel like Jesse is the only right answer.
All right, man.
You'll have all three, the trio, back to back to back. And one day when we're all racing in the Cup Series, one day you'll be able to say that we all did that back to back.
All right, so there you have it, folks. Jesse Love. Jesse Love has been nominated to be the next guest on Intern Talks Wheel. But there we have it, folks. Another successful interview, many, many months after the first, and another successful interview with a driver I think is going to be one of the best in the world, not just in America, but in the entire world, in Brent Crews. Brent, thank you so much for being
Yes,
here.
thank you. Thank you for having me, intern. I had a great time.
Wonderful. All right, folks. My name is Intern I Talk Wheel, and thanks for watching. Let's catch you on the next one. We did it!
Hey,
We did it. Hold on, let me
thank you for having me. That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun.